I'm Yo-Yo.
And I'm Katia. Welcome to our podcast.
Each week we learn from the experts about all things women's health and happiness.
We are two very normal, imperfect women.
Navigating this crazy thing called life.
And trying to stay happy and healthy while we do it. So, grab a cuppa.
Or tidy away that pile of laundry.
And enjoy our discoveries. Hello and welcome.
Welcome to another episode, and this is episode number
48.
48. We're almost at the big 50.
Yeah, landmark stuff.
Yes, exciting.
But today,
we have Andrew McGonigle for you, who is a medically trained yoga anatomy teacher, and he keeps himself really up to date with all the latest science about yoga and its effects on health and well-being.
Yes, Andrew originally trained to become a doctor, but moved away from Western medicine to become a yoga teacher, massage therapist, and an anatomy teacher.
He has since established himself as a prominent anatomy and physiology teacher in the yoga community, and has even contributed to several books and launched his own yoga anatomy online course in 2020.
His goal is to make yoga anatomy practical and engaging for anyone who's interested in yoga.
And one of the brilliant things about him is he dispels so many myths about yoga, so many kind of, like he said it, you'll hear it in the podcast, but myths that make yoga sound a bit hocus pocus, whereas actually he really brings the science and the evidence, doesn't he?
He's more talking about the benefits and the true benefits on your physiology, not the kind of other things that are a bit like just kind of anecdotal or buzzwords.
Yeah, buzzwords,
it's like kind of
not
like
evidence-based kind of things have been repeated, and then through time have become believed.
Yeah. So he talks about that in the podcast as well, and his understanding of the body and how it works, and not only just related to yoga, just in general is so it's insane. So anyone who is thinking, I'm not into yoga, I don't know if this is for me, you trust me, you'll find some of this. I ask you just to listen, you'll find some of this.
Yeah, reserve really some of your, if there's any skepticism. We're I'm the yogi, Katya's a skeptic. But because...
not even skeptic, just not like, I'm not in the yoga community, but like there's parts of it that I found all of it engaging and interesting.
Oh, yes.
So I think...
and I love the fact that Andrew... studied medicine, and he actually worked as a doctor for a little while, so he really has that understanding of the physiology, the nervous system, the endocrine system, the how the bones are made, like what makes up our bones. So just fascinating stuff.
If you're interested at all in anything to do with fitness or health, then you'll enjoy this episode, because it's not just even about the physical part of it. It's the nervous system and your brain, your mental health, and how it all helps and all connects. So,
So, for everyone alike, students, non-yoga students, teachers, yoga teachers, I think you'll all enjoy this one. So, for now...
we'll get on to it.
Yes. Enjoy! Welcome, Andrew. Thank you so much for joining the podcast this evening.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on. It's great to meet you both.
It's really nice to have you on. You are actually only our second ever male guest, which is fantastic. We have nothing against men on this podcast, but it just hasn't happened yet so many times. So welcome. And as we do, we like to dive straight into the juicy conversation. And you are an expert in all things anatomy and physiology about yoga. So can you start with a little top-line summary of maybe what are the key physiological benefits of a yoga practice?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think ultimately what it comes down to is the way that a yoga practice can kind of interact with our nervous system. I think ultimately that is the way where we see most benefits. So, as I'm sure most people listening at home are aware, a lot of us feel stress a lot of the time. We live in an interesting time where we're often overstimulated. We're receiving information and news kind of often constantly. Where, you know, most of us have smartphones and we're always connected. We're always plugged in. And I think it's almost like our nervous system hasn't had a chance to catch up with the way that technology is developing. And for a lot of us, we're in a state of fight or flight, more than is actually helpful, because we need fight or flight. We need a stress response to get us up out of bed in the morning, to keep us motivated, to jump out of the way of a taxi that's swerving around the corner. But for a lot of us, we're feeling that on like a day-to-day basis when it just isn't helpful. And yoga is a wonderful tool for helping us to switch to the other side, which is rest and digest. And we need both of these things, but often for many of us, we're on kind of one side of the pendulum, and yoga is a tool to help to keep bringing us back to the other side so that we can swing more readily between the two. You don't want to be in rest and digest the whole time, or again, you would just be so chilled out that you wouldn't get anything done. So it's about finding that flexibility in our physiology. We want to be able to like move between the two. And the main way that yoga does that actually is through the breath. So I like to think of yoga primarily as a breathing practice. So the one thing that yoga is particularly good at is it helps us to become aware of our breath. Because so often we can navigate through life and never think about our breath. Yeah, it's beautiful that we can breathe without thinking about it. Thank God. Yoga helps us to really tune in to notice our breath. And when we become good at noticing our breath tends to slow. And when the breath slows, that essentially tells the nervous system that we're feeling safe, and it switches us into this rest and digest phase. And another thing that yoga is really good at is helping us to focus on the exhalation. And when we exhale, our heart rate slows, and when we inhale, it quickens. It's just a natural phenomenon. So when we're focusing more on an exhalation, again, our heart rate's slowing, and it's sending the signal back to the nervous system saying, you're safe, you're okay, we've got this. And then it allows the nervous system to kind of put you into that rest or digest phase. And there's loads of other benefits, but I would say as a top line thing, it's, using the breath to help switch, to help interact with the nervous system is probably the most beneficial way. And then that has a ripple effect through all the other systems of the body, which is really amazing.
Interesting. I love that you've started with this, and it's not like core strength or flexibility or something, but just kind of going a bit more deeply into the rest and digest state. What are some of the ripple effects? How does it? What are those things? Because I have an idea, but I'd love you to explain that a bit more.
Well, look, think about when you were last stressed. That might have been just 20 minutes ago. That was me trying to figure out all the technology here in the back. What happens is our body gets set up to react to something, to either tackle something or to run from it. And therefore, our heart starts pumping faster. Maybe our breath speeds up. Blood is sent like the big muscles ready for action. And then as that's happening, the direction, the focus gets taken away from all the things that we don't need in that moment. So in that moment, you don't need your digestive system to be working particularly well. You don't need your reproductive system to be working particularly well. You don't need your immune system to be working particularly well. Yeah. But then the issue is that if you're in fight or flight for a lot of the time, then it means that the focus is being shunted away from these systems that are really important, so that when we're then able to find more of a balance, we're able to get stressed, but then shift out of it when we don't need that, then it means that more focus and attention can go to the digestive system, reproductive system, immune system, and the other systems of the body, and just create a bit more balance, essentially. That's why often when we're stressed a lot, we can also get unwell very quickly. We can catch every cold that's going around and things like that. Just that other systems aren't working optimally because all the focus is going to get ready to react to something, So, that's the thing. It just creates more balance through the body.
Or like when you finally go on holiday after and then you get ill because you've just been in a stressful mode. because that's the time to unwind, whereas yoga is more of a daily, weekly kind of practice on top of that.
Yeah, it keeps you kind of regularly in that rest and digest. Whereas, not
exactly.
just 2 or 3 times a year when you take a week off.
Completely. So I got asked a question yesterday. I was at a friend's barbecue and someone said to me, like, how often should I be practicing yoga? I was like, great question. I was like, little and often. Like, if you can find just even like 15, 20 minutes a day, it doesn't have to be complicated to do that. That's where the magic comes, because it's this like regular check-in with yourself, you know, a regular way to pause and like, how am I doing? Like, check in with your body, focus on your breath, you know. So I think that's more beneficial, honestly, than maybe doing 2 hours of yoga every 2 weeks. You know, it's just those little and often. You don't have to do anything particularly dynamic or creative. It can be just very simple, simple things that you do at home or in a class, you know, online with a teacher, whatever. So yeah, I think it's having that regular check-in. And if we want to feel our best every day, we have to show up for ourselves every day. That's the thing. There's no hack. There's no quick fix. You have to show up for yourself in a meaningful way if you want to feel your most vibrant self.
Yeah. Oh, you're speaking to my heart. This is like exactly what I preach. Like,
am I speaking to both of your hearts or just one heart?
Yes, you are. Yeah, you are. I am. It is actually. I'm like, well, 15 minutes. That sounds more palatable. And as you said, like not doing a lot, because I did read some of your book and about how you said that, you know, getting yourself into uncomfortable situations and being able to breathe through them, like translates into everyday life, like those stressful situations that will translate, that you can deal and breathe, and you become a bit more like natural at dealing, you know, with your breath and calming down. So I was like, but then because it is so uncomfortable, I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this. But as you just said, it's not, doesn't have to be these really tricky poses. It just needs to be like something that I'm just breathing and working through.
Yeah.
And there's something for everyone, because there's so many different styles of yoga. There's so many different teachers. There's so many different approaches. It's about you ultimately finding what works for you, you know? And also, you know, when I started practicing yoga many years ago, I practiced Ashtanga yoga, which is a very dynamic style of yoga. The level I was practicing to was almost like gymnastics. And I really thought, like, to me, that's what yoga was. That was the definition. And if it wasn't that, then it wasn't yoga. But as I've aged, that's totally changed for me. Yoga can mean different things for me. And now it's just about me rolling around on my mat, checking in with my body and doing some breathing practices, you know? So, it's about, it's, if you're really interested in practicing yoga, it's just about finding what works for you. And similar with meditation, like there's so many different ways to meditate. Certain practices won't resonate with you. That's okay. It's just about experimenting and maybe finding something that does resonate with you. You know? Can I ask you a question just to dive a little deeper? It's like, you're like, no, you're not asking the questions today. We're asking questions. And what do you...
I'm now on edge.
When you say it's uncomfortable, what do you mean by that?
So I suppose it's the stiffness. It's that's the stiffness of not being able to make the moves that someone's doing for me, or they've not given, maybe the teacher's not giving me something that I could do instead. So I have yoga blocks, which have helped a lot. But I think that's made my practice a bit, when I've tried it, a bit easier. But I suppose when I go to the gym or I'm doing like, you know, training, that muscle burn I'm used to, and I'm like, my body's like, yeah, it's fine, you know, you're fine with this. But with the yoga practice, it is that stiffness and the tightness, and I'm like, how far do I push this? Because I'm not sure if I should be in this position or I should stop, or if I'm breathing, when does it give and it's okay? You know, how long should I hold that uncomfortable for before my body's like, stop now?
Yeah. And I think only you ultimately can answer that. But I think it's also you trying to find the right teacher who's very good at offering options, because this is the thing. There isn't just one way to practice a pose. There are infinite number of ways, depending on the person, your intention, what's going on in your body, if you have injuries, your flexibility, all these things. So the beautiful thing is there's so many creative ways to practice each pose. And really, it's just about finding a teacher that's really good at, confident at offering those. And then you realize, oh, this is my version of the pose today, and that's completely fine. Someone else might have a very different version. That's good for them. That doesn't work for me, you know? So We'll get you there. We'll get you there.
And that's, we'll get, we're kind of going into a bit of that topic. So about, so I love that you went into the more nervous system regulating effects of yoga first, and that is the most important bit. But a lot of people do it to get more flexible. It's quite almost for me as a yoga teacher, it's almost how I try to hook people in, whereas in my real intention is to help them de-stress. But I know that on the surface level, they're like, I want to get flexible. It's like how you can hook them in first. So does yoga help with flexibility? And also, does it even matter? Does flexibility in a physiological sense, is it even important?
Yeah, I think it's another great question. I think, yes, yoga can definitely help with flexibility. I think a lot of people are put off by practicing yoga because they're not flexible enough, or they see themselves as not flexible enough. And I posted on social media the other week just this kind of quote that I came up with, like, saying you're not flexible enough to practice yoga is like saying you're too dirty to take a bath. Because ultimately, if you practice, you will become more flexible.
I just said that to Yolanta. I was like, you should have seen his post on. I was like, he put this on, so I can't really ever say it again. That's such a good quote.
The best.
So it's like that. The beautiful thing is that's often one of the nice benefits that comes, from a practice. I think the reason why so many people are fixated with flexibility is often the way yoga is maybe portrayed on the media or in social media. You see all these weird, wonderful poses. And it's almost like watching the Olympics and seeing these gymnasts do something. You can't help but be inspired, but then also you're like, God, could I ever do that? I think feeling flexible in your body can be a really empowering feeling. It can really make you feel like you have more ownership for your body and you're able to control things better. But ultimately, for me, it comes down to what I'm able to do on a practical level day to day. Like, I just want to make sure that I can always tie my own shoelaces, that I can squat if I need to, if you know what I mean, that I can reach high for something. So for me, the flexibility, it on a day-to-day basis, just making sure that I can do all the things that I want to do and keep doing those, for the coming decades. I used to be fixated with things like getting my leg behind my head. I used to practice. I could get both of my feet behind my head. Not very practical, If you want to scratch the back of your head, you can just use your hand. You don't need to use your foot, So I think it's often, sometimes it's nice to like have the motivation to think, oh, I'd love to strive for this goal, this physical goal. But ultimately for me, it's like, there's so many things that I want to spend my time and energy on. I'm like, is this really meaningful to me? And maybe it is. Maybe getting your leg behind your head is meaningful for you in some way. Like, I'm not going to challenge that. But ultimately, it's like, what is meaningful to me? And and does this matter? And I think it's a great question. So, but it will come. Like, if you practice yoga regularly enough, you will become more flexible. It's one of the really, really nice benefits about it, and I just hate that it often, this idea like stops people from practicing or stops people from ever going to yoga class worrying that, oh, I'm not at that level. Well, you don't have to be. Again, it's just about finding the right practice, the right teacher who's going to introduce you to that, and it's a journey.
Absolutely.
So it's definitely finding the right teacher when their intentions are to just help you on a daily basis rather than showcasing something. Whereas you said, it's nice to have a goal, but that daily one is more important. So even if they entice you, as you said, with a hook of a goal, but then they get you on the daily thing, is actually better for you long term.
Yeah. It's
exactly.
If I look back in my Instagram, like years ago, I started off posting the most crazy poses I could possibly manage, and as the years have gone by, I've really stopped wanting to do any of that. I don't even want to post pictures of me in poses, because I always think like, what is the point of that? That's not, it doesn't serve much purpose. It just makes a lot of people think, oh, I'm probably not going to do that, so yoga's not for me.
Yeah, because ultimately it depends who your audience is. Like it's like, who are you targeting here? Because say, for example, you're a teacher and your audience happens to be dancers or ballet or ballerinas, you know what I mean? Like, maybe you're teaching at a dance school, then like you want to market in a way that is attractive to those people, and they think, oh, great, like I could do that, or I want to try that. But I've been mentoring some teachers recently, and I've been looking at their website and social media, and I'm like, well, if you're trying to target newcomers, you putting pictures of you in these poses probably isn't inviting for them, because they're going to look at that and think, oh, that's not for me. So you have to really think about who, like, you know, who are we presenting this to? Who are we wanting to receive this information? And again, there's nothing wrong with doing all the big fancy poses and all that stuff, but it's about thinking about also who are you talking to here? Who are you hoping to attract? You know?
Yeah, definitely.
So I suppose those ballet dancer teachers have got a very small niche, whereas there's like so many millions of people who could be hooked just by being like normal, being like, this is
yeah. Super. Well, thank you. Really interesting. Kind of, because I want to ask your physiological knowledge. I want to really dig deep a bit. What about posture? Like, what makes posture? Is posture even important? We're sitting up now. And can yoga help with that?
So this is a really, really interesting topic. It's very controversial, and it's been an unpopular topic for me for a while. Like, I find that I've got a lot of pushback when I share information about it. The thing is, ultimately, this idea of good posture, it's essentially a social construct. It's not actually evidence-based. There isn't evidence that says that if you sit or stand in a certain way, you're going to get these benefits. And if you sit or stand in this way, you're going to end up with these issues. That's just not, that there isn't evidence to say that. So I've dug a little bit into the history of this. And the idea of this modern kind of good posture actually stems back centuries ago to the military. It was formed as part of the military drill, getting people to stand upright to basically enforce discipline. And then it was then adopted by kind of gentry in London to essentially distinguish them from other people of a lower class. And it fed into our society with a meaning of wellness and health. But actually, again, there is no evidence to kind of back that up. And now in modern day, it's become so ingrained in our society that it's very easy to think that there is a good, strong backing behind these ideas. And it's not. There's actually been a ton of research that's looked into the corporate world. Because, you know, if anyone's had experience in the corporate world, you know that a lot of money is spent on ergonomics. So on getting the right chairs, the right desk set up, manuals on how to lift a heavy object, you know, how to sit and stand, how to, you know, do all these things. And they basically tracked this, and they looked at the incidence of low back pain before these interventions and after, and there were no changes. So billions of dollars have been spent on all these interventions to improve posture in industry, in the corporate world, and there's been no benefit in terms of decreasing lower back pain. Now, the thing that will help to lower back pain is helping people to increase their job satisfaction. So there's almost like more of like a psychological component. So if they spent all that money on actually figuring out how are we going to help people to feel better in the environment on a day-to-day basis, that would actually help lower the cases of back pain. But all these ergonomic changes haven't. So what I personally do is I just spend more of my time and energy moving my body regularly instead of worrying about am I sitting or standing in the right way. You know, so, you know, I work a lot from home. I'm at my desk a lot. I just make sure that I break up the day by moving, even if it's at my chair, doing some kind of cat-cow movements in the chair, you know, moving my spine, you know, moving my shoulders. I just, yeah, again, spend more focus on moving and less time worrying about how I sit or stand, because we've evolved to move. So any prolonged sitting or standing position, whether it's deemed good posture or bad, it's just not going to be that helpful for us. We just want to move our body as much as possible. So controversial, I know, and it's still this multi-billion-dollar industry out there.
But it's also that they're just trying to invent ways to make people sit for longer to work at their desks, and it's like how ergonomic we've got all these chairs for you, and actually,
so you can work more hours.
You need to spend 10 minutes walking, and then you'd actually probably work and be happier, and everyone would be better.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And thank you for bringing the controversial point. It's nice to have people thinking along different lines from kind of the cultural narrative. So that's fantastic.
But it's also that people just get ingrained, as you said, they're so ingrained.
Yeah, it does, right. It's so when something gets repeated so often and for such a long time, it's often then perceived as fact. But it's fascinating when you delve deeper and you actually look and you go, oh wow, well, the research tells us something totally different. You know, it can be a difficult one to take on board, but I just encourage people just to be open-minded and just to always be a little skeptical, like a bit of healthy skepticism is always good.
Definitely. Moving on to another physiological topic, what about bone density? So I've delved a little bit into some research from my own kind of yoga blogging, and could you explain maybe what research is there and what the evidence is about bone density and yoga, different styles of yoga, maybe
can I say the different
types, specifically perhaps for women, if that makes a difference?
Yeah, no, of course. So basically, our bone mineral density changes through the years. It peaks in our mid-20s for everyone, and then for women there is a plateau. And then there's quite a rapid decline after perimenopause, postmenopause time. That region, there's a rapid decline. For men, there's just a little bit more of a gradual decline after the mid-20s. So for everyone, regardless of your gender, as we age, our bone mineral density decreases. But for women, this rapid decline around the menopausal area is something that we need to think about. And the reason why we don't want our bone mineral density to decrease too much is because it increases the risk of fracture. So if you had good bone mineral density and you happen to fall over and you landed on your hip, there's a good chance it'll be bruised, but you're not going to break anything. But if you have low bone mineral density and you fall over, you could break your hip, and that's just something that you don't want to happen, you know. So but the beautiful thing is what we know about all the tissues of the body, including bone, is that bone adapts to the demands that we put on it, which is really amazing. Because a lot of people think of bone as inert. It's not alive, because we think of bone as the skeleton. You know, if we have the anatomic skeleton, bone is living, dynamic tissue, and it's constantly being remodeled. So in fact, every 10 years, a bone is brand new. All the cells of that bone have been replaced. So it's like almost like a brand new bone. It's amazing. So this is constantly happening in the background. Yeah, amazing. But the other important thing is something that's called the progressive overload principle. So if you want the bone or any tissue to continue to adapt, you basically need to increase the load that is applied to it. Okay, so imagine you were at the gym and you were doing arm curls and you were lifting, you know, I'm in pounds here because I'm now in America, but say you were lifting 5 pound weight, you know, you would get strong, particularly if you have had a sedentary lifestyle before, but then you would plateau. Your muscle wouldn't get bigger over time. If you want the muscle to get bigger, you have to gradually increase the weight. It's the same with your bone. If you want your bone to continue to get stronger, and we have to do that because we're fighting this natural decline over the years, then you need to do progressive exercise. You need to be progressively increasing the load and maybe even doing some impact training. And this is the thing with yoga. So yoga can be a great stepping stone. So if you have a sedentary lifestyle, yoga can be a great way to help you to become more active. But at some point, it's just not progressive enough to bring about meaningful change to your bone. Okay. So but let's not discount yoga, because the thing that yoga can do is it can help with your proprioception, which is your spatial awareness. It can help with fall prevention. It can help with your balance. These are massive things that will help you in the long run. But yoga itself isn't going to be that brilliant for building bone mineral density. And the issue is that there's been some studies about yoga for bone mineral density that were really bad quality, but they were just shared so widely, and they had these fancy titles that looked very promising, that a lot of people have kind of convinced themselves, or have been convinced, that if I only practice yoga, it's going to be enough. And that actually scares me, because that's misinformation. I would hate for someone to think, well, I don't need to, lift weights, or I don't need to do impact training because I'm practicing yoga twice a week. It's enough. Unfortunately, it's not enough as we age. We need to be diversifying what we do. So again, yoga can play a really wonderful part in that, particularly by preventing falls as we age. But yeah, it's just not progressive enough to bring about meaningful change. And one of my big goals is to really help stop the spread of misinformation like that, that can be potentially really harmful for people.
Yeah, it's really interesting, because yoga actually covers the majority of things you need for longevity, as in like your balance, your, it lowers your blood pressure, your meditation, you're loading to a certain extent, but then you plateau. So then like your strength training, resistance training might come in. But then what about the cardio side? Because it does, when you've started to do, because sometimes resistance training can get your heart rate up, and you do, is it Ashtanga?
Ashtanga is the more physical one, but then there's loads of other styles.
But then, because it can get your heart rate up to a certain extent as well, that you're in like an aerobic.
Well, I don't know. I mean, personally, I wanted to ask a question about cardiac or cardiovascular benefits, because I know even in Ashtanga, your heart rate doesn't really get up very much, but I have heard of cardiovascular benefits, and I was wondering, are these more related to potentially the rest and digest state that we get in? But what are your thoughts on the cardiovascular benefits of yoga?
Well, here's the thing. It's all going to depend on your starting point. Because again, if you have a completely sedentary lifestyle and then all of a sudden you're practicing yoga, it is going to be a cardiovascular workout for you to a certain point. Again, we need things to be really progressive. So at some point, if you're practicing that regularly, you're no longer going to stimulate the cardiovascular system in the same way as you did when you were less active. Does that make sense? So if you're maybe an athlete and you're coming to yoga, it's not going to be a cardiovascular workout for you necessarily compared to what you normally do. So it's going to depend on your starting point and also the type of yoga. As you know, if you're practicing yin yoga, it's not going to be a cardiovascular workout. But if you're practicing something very dynamic, it could be for you. Does that make sense? So we don't look at yoga traditionally we don't really typically classify it as a cardiovascular workout, but it's going to depend. But there's a lot of great research that does look at how yoga impacts the cardiovascular system, and it's really promising. And so there's a systematic review, or a couple of different reviews. So what a systematic review is basically when a person or a group of people gather all of the research that's been done on a certain topic. They'll literally gather every study that's been done looking at yoga and cardiovascular health, and then they'll apply a filter to that. So they'll only kind of then collect the best quality studies of those. Those studies have to kind of pass, a certain criteria. And then they collate those and they summarize it all. And they give this conclusion based on the best, most high quality information that's out there. And it basically, these studies tell us that yoga can lower all of the major risk factors for cardiovascular disease. It's really amazing. We don't always fully understand the mechanism behind how yoga helps to get these benefits. We understand that these benefits are available to us. But again, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think it's ultimately, again, the nervous system, So, yoga can lower our resting heart rate. It can lower our blood pressure. And also, the more we practice yoga, we tend to lean towards a slightly healthier lifestyle. It tends for most people to make you a little bit more conscious of your eating habits and different things like that. And obviously, the less stress we have in our life, the better it's going to be long-term for the health of a heart, So yeah, it's really exciting. And what's beautiful is we often refer to yoga as like a heart-centered practice. And I think that takes on more of like a spiritual meaning or, an emotional meaning. But it's also beautiful to know that on a physiological level, it's also a heart-centered practice. It's going to help your heart to basically become healthier, work more efficiently. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It is cool. But yeah, I definitely, with the load in it and the heart rate, my heart rate goes up when I lift weights. Like I'm learning to lift weights. But even when I do yoga, my heart rate goes up then because it's the movement's different. And I find my watch,
unfamiliar for you still.
So so I still get a cardio. Sweating.
Yeah. Well, and enjoy that cardio,
Yeah. And our body loves novel stimulus. So it's great to challenge yourself. Just think of it as I know you were saying you feel uncomfortable, but actually think of that, like reframe it and think this is actually a positive thing because I'm now challenging my body to do something that it's not used to. Because the thing is, if you're only ever doing what you're used to, you're not going to get the growth and the development that you want from that. But if you're constantly trying to do things that are maybe outside your comfort zone, that's actually can be a really good thing for you. You see, I'm convinced that I'm going to get you loving yoga.
Well, you actually hit the nail because put me a challenge in there. It brings out the competitive side of me and the pride. Yeah. So now I'm like, all right, then I will.
Oh, interesting. Well, kind of speaking of competitiveness, or on social media, we often see, like you mentioned it before, we get these images of ridiculous feats of flexibility, things that are more like gymnastics than maybe a traditional yoga practice. So let's talk about the potential for injury. What's the research about that? And are there any particular poses that you think maybe the risk outweighs the benefit for those poses?
Yeah. So another brilliant question. I think there's a lot of misinformation out there about this as well. So look, with any form of physical activity comes a risk of injury. That's just life. The beautiful thing is with yoga, it's actually low risk compared to a lot of other forms of physical activity. And the reason is really in order to create an injury, we need a mixture of force and velocity, okay, in order to derange the tissue. So think of like a skiing trip. Particularly if you're maybe skiing for the first time or you're new to skiing, there's a lot of force there and there's also speed involved, So an activity like that, there's a high risk. With yoga, even if it's a dynamic form of yoga, we tend to not be moving very quickly. And typically the maximum load that we work up to is, body weight. So with that, there's a decreased risk. Can injuries happen in yoga? Yes, of course they can. But, if you're listening at home, just feel safe in the knowledge that yoga is low risk. And really, it's about the approach that you take to it. So if you're approaching things progressively and you're listening to your body and you're resting if you need to, or taking a different option if you need to, then the chances are that you're not going to injure yourself. And there's been tons of research looking at this that's really nice. A lot of the information out there is anecdotal. So of course injuries can happen, but then that gets spread like wildfire. Because there's also something called the negativity bias. Yeah. So when something is perceived to be negative, you're more likely to hear it, retain it, and share it with other people. So, there's a lot of individual stories out there. It doesn't mean that we're all going to end up with yoga injury. In terms of specific poses, again, it's really going to depend on the approach that you take. Because if you're absolutely new to yoga, but you're determined to do a headstand in the first class, yeah, that's risky. There is a chance there that you could injure yourself in some way because you need to build up to that. You need to build up the body awareness. You need to build up the strength in the certain muscles. So you need to think of it as like a progressive thing. So, there's studios, particularly in America, that are like banning things like we're banning inversions, we're banning shoulder stand, headstand. I think that's a bit extreme because I think there are many people that can do it completely safely and get benefits from it. So I'm never kind of black or white when it comes to things like that. I think ultimately it's the approach that you take, because I think it just creates a lot of fear mongering. If we ban things, it's like, oh, becomes this bigger thing. And I just think it's unnecessary. I think it's just looking at how can we change the approach to it.
Yeah. When you said fear-mongering, I think it reminded me of something you wrote about in your book, the power of language. Something, the way you talk about something. Like if you say, oh, this you got to be very careful where your knee is in this pose because otherwise you'll injure your knee. And then the person doing that pose will think, oh, I didn't do it exactly right. I must have injured my knee. So it's like a self-perpetuating negativity bias or nocebo.
And a lot of a nocebo effect. Yeah, because a lot of people have heard of placebo, where, if say you both had high blood pressure and I was to give you an M&M every day, but tell you this is the most effective, latest high blood pressure medication, a week later, your blood pressure would have lowered. So the positive expectation leads to a positive outcome. The opposite's also true. And so if I give you a sugar tablet and say, oh, this is cyanide, you'll end up with symptoms of being poisoned. Even though it's just sugar, it's kind of quite amazing. So,
powerful.
It's so powerful. And our nervous system's constantly on the lookout for danger to help to protect us, keep us alive. So even a word that as a teacher can be have a well intention behind it, to protect. So keep your knee above your ankle to protect your knee. That can send off an alert in your nervous system. And if you inadvertently then take your knee beyond your ankle in a warrior pose, which is completely fine, by the way, like if we couldn't naturally take our knee beyond our ankle, you wouldn't have got out of bed this morning. You wouldn't be able to climb a flight of stairs. There's so many things. You wouldn't be able to do any sort of chair pose or squat. So, but if they say that, then, your knee could inadvertently have kind of moved out of that traditional alignment. You can end up with pain as a result once you notice, even though there's no soft tissue damage. So it's really interesting. But
just because your body thinks you're unsafe.
Because you've been set up with a negative expectation. But even the bigger thing than that is it creates this narrative that parts of the body are fragile, and that's not empowering. It's not true, and it's not empowering. So when you're constantly being told, oh, do this to protect your knee, do this to protect your knee, don't do this, don't place your foot against your knee in tree pose to protect your knee, then what you're doing is you're constantly being told, oh, my knee's fragile. And then you could quite easily go down the route of hearing your knee make a click, which is totally normal in most cases, and then think, oh, I have to move less. You could end up with like a knee injury or knee condition down the line just because you start to treat your knee in a different way because of that reinforcement, So I think it's absolutely fine to say, keep your knee above your ankle in a warrior pose. That's traditional alignment. Just don't go that step further and say it's to protect. It's not. There are different reasons for doing that, but it's not about protecting the body. So it's a big one. It's a big topic.
In the same way, in like language and like cues like that, is there a risk of injury if somebody, just their bodies are all different, that if you're trying to be so specific where parts of the body should be, people trying to get into a stretch that naturally is too much for them, or their body doesn't respond that way, they could injure themselves in that way as well?
Yeah, well, think about this. So imagine you're slightly bow-legged. Yeah, which we're all on the spectrum. Yeah, there's a whole spectrum. You could be knock-kneed to fairly straight to bow-legged. We're all on the spectrum. Some people are an extreme end of the spectrum. So imagine that you're bow-legged. In a warrior pose, or say a high lunge, your knee is naturally going to sit on the outside of your ankle. Yeah? But if you have a teacher that's fixated on the knee tracking directly over the ankle, then they're going to be forcing you into an alignment that probably doesn't work for your body. That could be injurious. That could lead to an injury over time, Does that make sense? So really we need to be working ideally with the bodies that are in front of us rather than sticking to these rigid parameters. And I think we can use alignment in yoga as a framework, but we also need to develop the skills to move outside of that, and not be fearful that by taking the knee slightly to the outside of the ankle, that's something that the knee's going to spontaneously combust. It's not, it's like the knee in most cases is able to do that quite happily without any injury, So it's complicated. And I think one of the reasons why I love teaching anatomy is because it's not just the names or the bones and the muscles, but it's helping people to reframe things and helping people to look at the body in a different way and look at our body as being robust and resilient. And our body is anti-fragile. It's not fragile, it's anti-fragile, which means that it responds positively to the stress placed upon it, as long as that is progressively done, So yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant. Preach.
And actually, would it be? It's more of a. If somebody has like is in a high stressful like fight and flight mode anyway, sometimes putting like HIIT or loads on it actually increases the stress. So yoga is doing all of you need, but it's like actually pushing you into new challenges, but in a less stressful way. So your body's not going to be overstressed.
It's this lovely balance of like taking yourself out of your comfort zone often, or just being led through a sequence that you're unfamiliar with, but then coming back to the breath. So you get this balance of like, challenging yourself in a certain way, but then also keeping things centered with the breath and with your focus. It's quite a unique practice in that way. And then, as you mentioned earlier, we then take those tools off the mat, and that's where the magic comes.
Yeah.
Because you want to bring those skills into everyday life. And then when you meet a challenging situation, you think, oh no, I've got this. Like I can just take a beat, take a breath, and then I'm going to be a bit more focused on this rather than just being like, wow, like spiraling out of control, So it's like, that's where the real magic happens when we're able to bring it into day-to-day life.
Yeah. It teaches us to stay calm in discomfort, isn't it?
Yeah.
And whether that's physical discomfort in the yoga poses sometimes, or discomfort in traffic because or you're late for something,
and then we become okay or more okay with the discomfort, because often in life we're trying to push things away because we don't want to deal with them. And then when you have a stressful situation and you're like, oh, I was able to deal with that, then maybe you're able to peel the layers of the onion back a little bit and then go a little deeper and like, oh well, maybe I'm ready to deal with that thing that I've been kind of suppressing for a long time, So that's why it's just so layered, and like there's so many things that kind of
deeper. There's such deeper benefits.
Yeah, we show up for the flexibility, and then we get all these other things.
Exactly. There's all these sneaky, surprising benefits. You mentioned I asked before about bone density, and I was specifically thinking of perimenopause, postmenopause for women.
Yeah.
But I'm also curious, are there specific benefits for men that might be maybe absolutely it's the same for everyone, men and women, but is there something that might be beneficial for the guys to do yoga wise?
Yeah, I think pretty much the benefits are there for everyone. I think for men, this is a generalization, but a lot of men maybe aren't so great at like self-care and like checking in with themselves and slowing down, So, in that kind of archetype, that it can be a really interesting practice for that. There's a little bit of research that looks at yoga and fertility for men and like sperm health and things like that. But, but other than that, the benefits are really there for everyone. So there aren't really like specific things for men in general, but for women, it's a slightly different story because you have way more complicated physiology, essentially, because you're the greater sex. So so
only recent years.
So like pregnancy, for example. Or even, menstruation, menopause, pregnancy. So the great thing is there is actually a lot of research that's been done looking at this, and yoga can help prenatally with helping to reduce severity of prenatal depression, which is pretty amazing, which is, a big issue out there. It can help with different pregnancy outcomes, with labor outcomes, with birth outcomes. It can help with postnatal depression. So there's a lot out there. It can help you to manage some tricky menstruation symptoms, cramps, and things like that. There's some good research out there on helping with symptoms of menopause. So, and again, we're not always 100% sure on like the mechanism behind all of that, but again, a lot of it's like the its nervous system. And anecdotally, I've had quite a few friends who have really found yoga such a beneficial tool during pregnancy, and they're able to bring those tools like into the delivery room and just help them to kind of manage just a little bit better with everything that's going on. So it's that's really, really interesting for me. And I know that like it's interesting that how I think a lot of people are naturally gravitate to yoga during pregnancy. I think it's the time when a lot of people start yoga as during pregnancy, and it's nice to also like back that up and be like, yeah, a lot of people naturally gravitate to it, and there's now all this like research that tells us that in many cases it's really, really beneficial and safe as well, which is great.
Yeah, that's great to hear, because I think it wasn't on our list of questions because I'm currently pregnant and doing quite a lot of
Congratulations.
Thank you. And this is the second pregnancy, and I did quite a strong Ashtanga based practice all through my first pregnancy. And I don't know, I mean, it's you can never tell cause and effect when it's just one case study, can you? But I did feel extremely lucky physically, kind of just, avoiding back pain and all of that jazz, and feeling, I guess, quite calm and confident going in. I had a planned C-section, but that could be a stressful situation going in for surgery, but I felt very kind of, I don't know whether it's just me, my character, or maybe yoga practice has.
To be fair,
it's difficult to know.
I had I can't remember what it's called, PGP, when my hips with my first. I had to do yoga.
Pelvic girdle pain.
I had pelvic girdle pain, so I had to do yoga, and it's the only thing that would relieve it.
Okay,
is the movement of the pelvis in a slow, controlled way. Okay. Then with George, my second, I did hypnobirthing, which is basically the meditation breathing, and I had the most incredible birth ever, like, the at home in the pool. So, and that was because of the breathing. So technically yoga's had a big effect on my life so far.
So you are a yogi. What I'm hearing is you are a yogi, but you're just in denial. You just don't want to label yourself as a yogi.
I think also there's in the back of my mind, it's always been a spiritual and like flexible thing in my head, and I've never put myself in that box. But actually speaking to you, and like obviously with Yolanta a lot more, is that it has so many other benefits. And with my kind of running and training, doing CrossFit and like lifting weights, and I want to do a handstand, I need to be able to do the yoga and the stretching and the movement in more of a controlled way than a simple like lift a weight. It has to be more of a full range of motion.
Yeah, for sure. So, and just for a second,
you are changing my mindset.
Oh, good. Good. I'm glad. But coming back to like the pregnancy topic just for a second, also I think a lot of it's got to do with like the community, because there are these like great like prenatal classes. There's often mummy and me classes, or parent and me, and there's baby massage, and it's like I think yoga can also help to create community maybe when that's lacking in other areas, and I think that can be a big support for a lot of people, which is really nice, and that's going to help with all these other things that are going on.
Community, that's a whole other topic that's so important.
Then it kind of like stops them after that. After you've and it's like, where do you go then? If I'm not a beginner, but I'm not really intermediate, I need to go somewhere that it's kind of hard to find that same class that you're like, I'm going to stay and keep going to, because they're very specific, being like, Mum, you're on a journey, where's your journey after that then?
Yeah.
There's a gap in the market maybe there.
Music.
Oh, that's super interesting to hear your thoughts on kind of the life cycle of women at different points, that yoga is beneficial, especially on a nervous system level. So are there any other kind of pet peeves that you have about things that people say on social media, the general media, about the benefits of yoga, or anything else?
Oh, there's so many. Where do I begin? So, just to do a shameless plug for a second, my latest book is called The Physiology of Yoga, and it's a great book. Thank you so much. Each chapter we dive into a different system of the body, and one of the favorite parts for us writing it and also for the readers is we do myth or fact sections where we help to like demystify things that are out there. So look, there's so many things out there. Things like, twisting will detox your liver, and like that can, to someone that doesn't have any sort of science background, maybe that can seem plausible. But if you study physiology to any level, you realize quickly that detox isn't a mechanical process. It's not like wringing out a sponge. It's a cellular process. It's happening at the level of the cell, So, twisting has benefits. It's helping to keep the spine mobile and all that kind of stuff. But it doesn't have any like specific like magic effect that all of a sudden it's going to wring out the liver. And also the liver is like this dense organ that is surrounded by fat. So even if you could physically get your hands on it, you wouldn't even be able to wring it out because it's just like this kind of greasy organ. So it's just such an interesting thing. So just, even helping people just to realize like that just does not make sense, and yes, physical activity can help your detoxification system to work optimally. So that's a good thing. But there's no like magic thing. And I think that my issue is that when we focus on things like that, or people say things like, oh, when you do an inversion, it brings more blood to the brain. That wouldn't even be a good thing. Your brain wouldn't even want that, even if that was to happen, because it's everything's so controlled here, blood flow. But it's like that often takes away from the real benefits, because it kind of dilutes what's out there. And people think it's some kind of hokey pokey, hippie thing. And so that's the kind of pet peeve. Just there's a lot of misinformation. And obviously we talked about things like harmful things like bone mineral density, yoga, helping with that. We've covered that in detail, but I just don't want people to think that yoga alone is going to, improve things there. So yeah, quite a few pet peeves. I try not to get annoyed with things, but
Yeah.
The book is amazing.
Yeah, I really enjoyed. Well, we both have young children, so reading a book is quite difficult, like cover to cover. But I love the fact that there was these little sections, like the pet peeve or the myth, busting the myth section. So I could really if I only had a few minutes, I just go to like a page of the myth and just read that bit.
No, I see it more as like a reference book. I don't think you should sit up at night and read it unless you have insomnia and want to knock yourself out. But basically, I just see it as that way to like dive into certain areas that come up rather than feeling you have to like read it cover to cover. It's the kind of a book you keep for 10 years and you kind of keep checking in on, rather than having to read every chapter.
But it's also one that I think anybody, if you're in the health and fitness industry, should read anyway or have on their bookshelf, because even just to start, when you talk about critical thinking, it's something that everybody in life needs to, you learn at university, but you never really, especially in today's world where there's so much misinformation that, having that critical thinking hat on, it's just, will set you up in life, and, you won't get dragged down any strange paths and things that, that you don't need to be going down on. But also just to go back to like all the information in there, like I haven't learned, I did PE at the A level in human biology, but going back to it, it's just so fascinating again to read in such an easy way of like, you've broken it up, and the amount of research that you've done is incredible on this book.
Yeah, we really wanted to back everything up with studies because there's so much expert opinion out there, particularly in the yoga world, and we really wanted to move away from that. We really wanted to like have a reference. So pretty much everything that we say, other than the things that are now just completely accepted generally in the science world, we reference everything. So there are, I imagine, thousands of references at the back of the book. So it took a long time to create this, and we're so proud of it. And it's so exciting. It's actually been translated into like a ton of languages. So it's like we're reaching all these people that we never thought we would reach. So that's been really exciting. And then now we run like a book club where we it's live, and we every week we like break down a chapter and people can interact with us, and it's been really fun to kind of build community around it. So it's been a great journey. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to do it.
Oh, fantastic.
It's really good. And not just yoga, just in everybody's life, or any fitness professional would learn a lot from it.
Yeah, other fitness professionals, if you're a PT or anyone else, just to learn about the the nervous system benefits of movement and breath. I think any fitness professional could incorporate that into whatever they did as well.
Yeah.
Even like when you went into the hormone, like the endocrine is it endocrine
system?
The
hormones.
Yeah.
I would say that wrong.
Yeah.
But yeah, even when you're into that, that's really fascinating.
Yeah. So we've talked a bit about your book. So for everyone listening, it's called The Physiology of Yoga. And we'll put all the links in the show notes. You have a few other things I think you might want to mention. You have a course, you have another book. Go ahead and just mention what you have.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I mentioned The Physiology of Yoga and then the accompanying course. It's live twice a year. And then I run in the background like an on-demand course. So anyone that really wants to dive into the anatomy of yoga in a deeper way, I run like a 30-hour program for that. You get like lifetime access. I do live Q&As every month. So again, it's very interactive. We create like a community around it, and I love that. And again, it helps you to reframe things. As I said, like it's not just about you memorizing all the bones and the muscles. Like that's not going to really help you if you're a yoga teacher to become a better teacher. It helps you to reframe things. So I love that. And then there are, specific topics that I run live workshops on. So I do one on yoga for osteoporosis. We do a whole deep dive. So if this like piqued your interest, check out that. I run that periodically through the year. I do one on low back pain, demystifying that, on arthritis, and then one on refining our language as yoga teachers as well, which is something I'm really passionate about. And I'm kind of got like a book idea in there percolating somewhere. So for that. So
ooh, fantastic.
Wow.
Yeah, thank you. Wonderful. I'm personally very interested. I'm going to be browsing your courses, being a yoga teacher myself.
I love that, yeah.
So thank you. Yeah.
No, I'm just interested because you change it into like the physiology of it, and not like it's all about the breathing, the spiritual, which I'm like, I just don't get that. Like sometimes when I'm so busy in my head, and then actually bringing it back down to this is actually what it's doing. It's not detoxifying your liver. It's actually the purpose of this pose is for this, and it's a bit more like actually.
And what's interesting is this, for me personally, the more I've studied the physiology, the better I've connected to yoga from a spiritual way. Because a lot of people also think that they don't want to dive into the physiology and anatomy because it's going to change the way they have that spiritual connection. So it doesn't also have to do that. You know what I mean? So there's like, we all can take from this practice what we need to take from it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
That's a nice way of looking at it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because it makes it more subtle. It makes it kind of actually, if you don't have to be too prescriptive about the particular positions that the body is in, it does make it more subtle in how you are feeling every movement of your body and your breath.
And it's just helped me to have more awe for the body. Like the more I dive into it, I'm always just gobsmacked at how incredible this amazing vehicle that we have that like helps us transport around the world. And, it's just, it's been a really exciting journey for me. And I hope that I can instill some of that kind of passion into other people.
Oh, I'm sure you can. And I'm sure you do regularly. So thank you. So we just have, I think, maybe one last question. Very personally, it can be yoga related or it can just be life, blue skies, whatever you want to say. For you, what does health and happiness look like?
Yeah, so for me, ultimately, it's about being able to be present, because often life just takes over, So whatever, so for me, it's like having those points during the day. Like for this morning, I got up and I just went out for my neighborhood hike. It's often also known as a walk. In LA, we call it hiking. But I live in the hills here, so it's strenuous, but like it's just like being out there without the earphones, without the phone, and just being able to like be present to what's happening around me is so special. And the more I can like have that in my life during the day, that makes me feel happy.
Yeah, beautiful.
Oh, nice.
It's a really good question. Thank you.
Yeah, presence. No, thank you. And the beauty is everyone has such a personal answer to it. So we love hearing everyone's personal interpretation. And presence is, Very important. Lovely. Yeah. Well, I think that's been an hour of very fascinating conversation. Thank you so much. Is there anything
such a pleasure.
else you would like to mention?
I don't think so. We've covered a lot, haven't we? I would just encourage people just to stay active. Stay active. And look, if right now, if you're listening, you're thinking yoga, I still don't think yoga's for me. That's fine. Like just be active. Find the thing that you love and just keep moving your body, because you are going to be so grateful of that as you age, So just find the things that you love and just stay active. It's going to help you in so many ways. And then maybe one day we can encourage you to practice yoga along with all of that.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Great finish.
Great way to finish. So for now, we wish you a lovely rest of your day, because it's earlier in the day for you in LA.
It's been beautiful. Thank you so much. Yeah, I've loved it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Welcome back, everyone.
Welcome back.
Thank you for listening to the whole episode and following us through to the end.
Absolutely. I won't go into lots of detail because we do talk about this in our weekly waffle, but wow, I loved that episode. Just wanted to get that out there.
It was so interesting and really engaging, and I love what Andrew's doing.
Yes. Like so many times I just wanted to go preach, and I did once, but like all the time, like everything he was saying, I was like,
I think you might have done it more than once.
Oh, probably. I think it was the American, although because he's in America, the American in me was coming out. Yeah. But
we hope you felt the same, and we hope you learned something, or you found it interesting, or something you didn't know before. But yeah. If there's one thing you've taken away, then that's what this podcast is for.
And please let us know, if this kind of episode changes your mind about something, or if you decide to start a new exercise regime or yoga or something else, weightlifting, whatever you want. Let us know if we have motivated you. That would just make our day, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
That would be so amazing. So, but for now, we're going to love you and leave you, and we'll see you on Thursday for
Weekly Waffle.
Yeah. So have a lovely rest of your day.
Bye. Thanks so much for listening all the way to the end.
If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can email us on hello@healthandhappinesspodcast.com.
Or we'd love to connect with you on our Instagram, Facebook or TikTok pages.
You'll find the links to all our socials and more on our website, www.healthandhappinesspodcast.com.
And lastly, before you go, please give our podcast a rating and a review. It really helps others find us.
See you next week.
Bye.